I'd love to just dive into who you are and what you do at your company, and then we'll sort of backtrack a little bit from there and figure out how you got into this crazy industry and where you think it's headed.
Sure,
Who are
yeah.
you, and where do you hail from, Will?
So my name is Will Stackable, and I am one of the co-founders. There's three of us of Springboard VR, which is, I guess, now I'd say the largest out-of-home network for VR content. So we work both in the education sector with museums, libraries, schools, et cetera, around the country, and then we started out with primarily in the entertainment space. So many of you probably have heard of VR arcades that are popping up in all the major cities and small cities. And then across the board, family entertainment centers, amusement parks, movie theaters. It's kind of a growing sector that we've been a part of since the beginning. We actually started as operators and then switched over to software. So I'm primarily on the content side of things, which is super fun. My background is kind of in the video and media world. I had a production company for about 10 years, and we filmed with companies large and small, really all over the world. I was traveling, multiple times a year to film overseas. And so I'd kind of been in the media space, and then early on got excited about VR as kind of a new storytelling medium. By the way, if my internet cuts out at all, let me know. I could kill my video, that might help. But so
You're coming through just fine right now.
Okay, good. I thought somebody maybe said they missed something. It's Springboard VR. Like the diving board, Springboard. And so I guess we've been up and running for about 2 years now, and we're now at, just to kind of the scope. Right now, we are running 500 locations in 46 or 47 countries. And then in the EDU space, obviously it's smaller right now, but it's growing quickly. We just finished a pilot with about 50 universities.
Wow.
All over, and really good feedback. We're the official partner for HP, and unofficial for Intel and Dell. It's kind of moving in that direction. But so when they go sell VR ready PCs, they need software to run. Like if there's going to be a computer lab, you can imagine, just like a VR arcade, they need software to manage the location, and then they need somebody to be able to handle all the content licensing for the university. So obviously the university is not going to go out and negotiate licenses with a bunch of individual content creators. So the EDU space has kind of been really growing quickly in the last 6 months, as the entertainment is still sort of picking up. So that's a little bit about, I'd say the common thread for me has been, I love this call because I do feel like I am a content creator. I feel like in another world, I would just be working at a studio so I love the kind of the narrative medium, whatever medium that plays out in, but just the ability to tell stories in unique ways. And I think we're just now figuring out even the basic language of what that looks like in VR. So it's weird to be a little bit on the other side, that I'm kind of more on the distribution side, and I don't get to play around as much in the actual creation side, but I hope it can sort of go back and forth over the next few years.
So when did you start Springboard? How long have you guys been around?
We started, so the short story is when the HTC Vive came out, I got one of the first shipments, and I had bought the early, the dev kits and stuff from before, and I had ordered even stuff from China back before even Oculus was a thing. So I'd been kind of piddling around with VR and not really being serious about it. And then the HTC Vive came out. My partner, Brad, business partner, Brad, was in town. We were raising some money for a different venture that had kind of honestly just fell through. We had a big lead investor, and things were going south. And so he was on his way to the airport. He had a couple hours to kill. And I said, hey, you got to come by my house and try out this HTC Vive. It's crazy, And he said, oh, I'm not really a gamer. I'm not really into that stuff. I'm like, I know, just try it. So he comes over, puts on a headset. I got him into Zombie Training Simulator. And no joke, he almost missed his flight because of how into it he was. And he called me on his way to the airport and said, we've got to get into this. Like, this is a new medium. I mean, this is going to change everything. What could we do? And so we thought, well, let's give more people this experience. Let's start, we didn't even know what to call it, really. Let's start some kind of a location, in the mall where people could come in and pay to get into a headset. It's expensive, it's complicated to set up. So 6 weeks later, we opened a 3,500 square foot space in we got lucky. We got the old, Apple was leaving that mall, and we got their old store that they'd spent $1 million renovating. So we basically just like threw up some dividers, put in like 15 Vives, and had this beautiful looking space. And we were, I think, I don't know, one of the first 10 arcades, you know, globally outside of China and Korea and Japan. So from there, we very quickly realized that running more than 3 stations without software was a total nightmare. And I specifically remember trying to find content. And I remember at one point we were trying to track down a content creator, and we posted on Reddit and said, hey, we will give $50 to anybody who can give us the contact information for this title, because they have no website. We can't, you know, it was like an indie VR studio. I think it was actually Brian from Accelerator, which is the zombie training simulator guys. So we got their contact info, got in touch with them, and negotiated a license. But of course, the majority of content creators, especially the bigger studios, were not going to spend the time of day for, you know, for us 12 stations at
location.
Yeah, $20 a station. It was just not even enough money for them to go through the legal or even get on a call with us. So the short story of how we started it was within a week of us opening, we had no idea what we were doing. We'd never been in retail before. We're hiring employees. We're, you know, just figuring out as we go along. And we realized we can't be profitable, right? Like running a location with throughput and everything else was all the stuff we had no idea. There was no way we were going to make money. The math didn't add up. And so we built the Springboard first to scratch our own itch, to be able to manage our own location and to be able to get content. And then I realized this is going to be a thing. Like VR arcades are going to be a thing. It's working. The business model works. It'll change, of course, and adapt and be you know, it'll change over time, but everybody's going to need this software.
Yeah.
So we started doing marketing sales. Next thing we knew, I think, you know, 3 months later, we had an MVP. We started, you know, actually offering it to other locations, and we launched, I think, April of 2017 with 40 locations. Yeah, I think that's right. Kind of mid to the end of 2017 with 40 locations. And then, yeah, last year we added 30 locations a month on average, and we're up to about 500 now. So,
wow.
Which still a small number, but you have to keep in mind that like out of home VR didn't exist, you know, and we were one of the first 10 locations that actually had, and we were using a consumer headset in a commercial space. So it was a very new industry, and everybody's still kind of trying to figure it out.
So for each of those locations, how many stations do they have? Is that a thing that you probably track, right? Like
yeah, it varies. It varies, I think 8 to 15. I mean, there's some locations that have up to 30. Wow. So it really varies widely. And then there's mobile events. And then if it's an amusement park, oftentimes they have more of a dedicated setup with, say, like 4 stations, but they're really nice and built out. So it does vary, but I'd say with needing to get throughput up on the weekends, just like a movie theater, same situation. You have to have at least 8 to 10 stations in order for the math to work out.
And so do you still have that initial location? So we ended
up shutting it down, selling it off after we did a full year, and it kind of became like an R&D space. And we realized, like, man, what are we doing running a location? Like, the software stuff is taking off. We're just holding on to our, you know, bootstraps, trying to stay ahead of the demand. And so, yeah, we after a year, we shut it down. I kind of miss it. I mean, so now we have to be really proactive to just constantly be spending time with operators to understand how things are changing. So everything, I mean, location-based entertainment is changing daily. We're seeing arcades that are becoming more like community centers, that 50% or more of their income is from a variety of different, you know, corporate training events, after school programs. There's a lot of arcades experimenting with narrative nights, you know, immersive narrative content, turning, you know, so the film buffs in your town want to watch the new Sundance stuff. And so I think there's a lot of, and then even the esports side of things, with free roam as opposed to just going in and renting a headset. So I think they're trying to figure out, you know, what does it look like to.
And so there's sort of like 2 lines that I want to like dive into you about. Like, one is getting your perspective on how the LBE space is working for the operators, and what little experiments you see people running that you think in your position are starting to like pay off and work, and maybe which ones aren't.
Yeah.
And then I want to dive into it more from the creator's perspective in terms of what opportunities are out there for creating content for the LBE space and how they can engage with you and Springboard to get their content out there.
Yeah.
So let's tackle the operators first. Have you seen, like, how much churn have you seen? Like, how many locations have gone out of business over the last couple of years? Like, what's the success rate like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I should have that in my back pocket, the actual number. I would say we saw like an early wave of very, very early pioneers that were kind of like us, had no idea what they were doing, jumped in. Some of them struggled and some of them went out of business pretty early on in the first, even 6 months or so.
So this is 2016? What year are we talking about?
Yeah, end of 2017. Yeah, 2017, and then even first part of 2018. What we did start to see the second half of last year was we saw kind of a core of locations that I think when we did a survey mid 2018, 2/3 of locations were profitable, which was actually surprising to me, considering everything that goes into figuring out a retail location, much less in a brand new, technology space. So, and then we started to see in 2018 a lot more franchises start popping up. We saw locations that would open their second or third company store. You could see them experimenting, like I said, with different types of business models and different income streams. I think a big learning curve was what they could pay for content. So early on, we had an open marketplace where, so just briefly how Springboard works, I should explain that. For a content creator, any content creator can submit to be on the platform. But at this point, we're curating pretty heavily, specifically because a lot of content is either early access, or it's designed for, if it's a narrative title that's 2 hours of content, it doesn't really make sense without modifications in an arcade setting where the majority of customers are going to put on a headset for the first time, and they're not necessarily going to have 3 hours to play through the experience. So we kind of are doing curation so that you basically submit, and then we have an evaluation process, which you can read about on our website, but it includes just a 30-question scorecard where we look at the different things that go into making a title successful in the out-of-home space. And then we also have a content guidelines, obviously. So if that all goes well, then we bring it onto the platform, do some marketing promotion around, each title, and then it's available for operators to license. They charge their end user $20, $30 for an hour or per play. There's a variety of different business models for the operator, but the way that we charge the operator is, the operator, with the end user. The way we charge the operator is either by a per minute basis, which is the industry standard. It's kind of the most popular. So it's if it's 6 cents a minute, which is the average on the platform, and you play, 100 minutes, we charge you at 6 cents. And then there's also monthly and annual, and then a per play. So that'd be an activation type charge. So that's kind of how that's how content creators interact. We take a platform fee, which is 25%. Yeah, sorry, what are you going to say, Renee?
I muted myself because I'm, by the way, for people that are, this is my third Friday forum and final Friday forum from Hawaii. So I try to mute myself.
Tough life, man.
Yeah, I'm actually headed for the airport right after this.
Oh, great.
But I want to rub it in everyone's face as much as I can.
You look Hawaii. The hat and everything. You just look like you've been recharging.
Wanted to bring my full attire. This is my travel hat. Whenever I go any place hot, I got it for my honeymoon when we went to Bali. So I was curious about how that in terms of those different ways of charging, does the creator get to decide how that is being, whether it's per minute or per activation or annual or monthly or that, or is it the operator that makes that decision?
So we kind of have a back end for the content creator where they can pick and choose what types of pricing options they want, and everything is controlled by the content creator, by the studio. Okay. So you can choose not to distribute with certain licensing methods. We have regional pricing, so if you want to be able to price regionally, and then obviously you can also decide whether or not you want to distribute to entertainment or education or both. Many content creators, here's a surprising fact that we found from our pilot, which is that you would think that universities just want subject-specific, deeply integrated type of content with curriculum. But in fact, most universities are basically putting in mini VR arcades on campus and most of them want entertainment content just as much as they want educational content. So for instance, super hot in Beat Saber were in the top 5 titles played over this 3-month period in our pilot. And it's because a lot of these, if you imagine if you're the CTO at a university or you're the dean of libraries, you want buy-in from your faculty and from your students. And so are you going to put them in a dissection thing? You might, but you might also just stick them in Beat Saber and they're going to have a blast. And of course, students coming in. So I think the idea that universities want to expose their population to a new technology, and that includes all the fun stuff. So I don't think universities are there yet. I think it's another even couple of years before we're talking about deeply integrated curriculum, with teachers adopting and integrating as part of their classroom experience. So I think for a long time, we're just going to see it as kind of a wing, or a student lab that people can go and visit. So,
and I imagine like a lot of universities that have film programs or game design programs would be the targets.
I think the narrative stuff would be great. Is going to do really well in universities. That's students are going to want to get into that.
Totally see that.
Yeah,
and professors too. So curious, in terms of, you said that there's like 2 branches that, you can go down as a creator. You can submit to entertainment or education. And this gets to Jason's question a little bit. Is there a distinction in terms of pricing for universities?
Yeah. So universities typically only want to do monthly or annual pricing for simplicity and for just the way that their billing system works. So typically, you'll set a different pricing for education.
Fascinating. Okay, cool. So I want to still dive into a little bit of like, I think we went on a valuable tangent about what was going on from the operator's perspective. So there's you said mid 2018, you did a
survey. 2/3 of operators were profitable. We started seeing more franchises pop up.
So which ones, what characteristics are making profitable, successful LBEs? And can you give some examples of like which ones you think are like really killing it in the space and doing particularly well?
I don't want to go, for the audience sake, I don't want to go too deep into everything, because I should also say that we're talking specifically about the VR arcade, kind of the model where you come in and at some level or another, you're renting a headset, you're paying for an experience. There's a whole nother wing of LBE that I know all of you are familiar with, which is the turnkey setups, the dedicated IP-driven, the Jurassic Worlds.
Yeah.
I think we could get into that whole conversation, and I think there's a lot of interest.
Are you playing in that space, by the way? Are you playing in like dedicated?
We are in the free roam space. Yes, the dedicated setups. So like if you guys have seen the Beat Saber units or the Predator VR, some of those are almost the equivalent of just the old school NBA Jam. They come with a dedicated setup. It's connected to good IP, and it includes maintenance and all of that. So I think some of the bigger LBE units, whether that's the Dave & Buster's of the world or some of these family amusement centers, they're going to do a good amount of that. But I think there are some content creators, I think, that are going that direction. But I think the world I'm interested in the most right now is where we are the most dominant, which is in that sort of arcade space, if you will, which is, I think, is doing surprisingly well, really. I mean, I say surprising just because early on I would maybe even in early 2018, I had the question mark in my head of, does this make sense? Like once the headset prices come down, once everybody has them in their home, I assumed consumer VR would just blow up in a way that it hasn't quite yet.
Yeah.
But I think what's been interesting to see is that the sort of the arcade space, if you will, and that's a broad brush, but they're doing a good job of realizing that they can't just, the business model can't be, you pay $30 to rent this piece of equipment. And so they've been really focusing on all the different things I talked about. So birthday parties, group events. We see a lot. I talked to an arcade in Salt Lake City that 50% of their business is coming from tech companies and other corporate entities coming in and renting out their space to show off all their executives. Here's VR. Here's the experience. And then a lot of them are experimenting with esports. So a lot of esports titles are doing well. They're starting to build a repeat customer base, which for any out-of-home or retail location if you can build like a 30% or more of your core revenue from repeat business, it's huge. And so the best way to do that obviously is with titles that tend towards the skill-based esports. So some of these the tournament style play that's being introduced. And then we're seeing also arcades that are more modular now. So where they can move the walls and create sort of an arena scale or a free realm. And then they can, on a weekday, they can just go back to having, 5 to 10 stations. So I think
what titles are succeeding in the esports? Or I didn't know. I haven't heard of anything that I was aware of that was falling. I mean, are people setting up leagues for Beat Saber? Like what?
Yeah. So I mean, there's been an interesting. So Beat Saber obviously doesn't yet. I think they will, but doesn't yet have a real strong esports component other than just sort of a global high score. Yeah. But, so recently Skyfront is one that's done well in the tournament space. We did one with Ubisoft with Space Junkies. There's a tournament right now going, and that's a Onward contractor. So a lot of them are the kind of, first-person shooter style. But the Beat Saber tournament we did with the Beat Games team was the largest esports tournament for VR yet. And I think we had 170 or something locations and thousands of participants. And there's been awesome. a lot of arcades that have continued that kind of to do a Friday Beat Saber night or whatever. So I think that will grow, hopefully. I think
esports is going to be huge.
The idea that your arcade could become, I don't know if you, in Vegas, there's the esports kind of arena in I don't remember, the Lux or something, but the idea that VR arcades, as they develop, could also become kind of the equivalent of a sports bar where you could go in and you could play your favorite game during the week, and then on the weekends you could reconfigure it and actually go in and watch other teams compete, professional teams compete. That's kind of a fun idea.
I know a lot of people on the call are probably more from like the narrative RV side of the universe where I normally live. But I have to say, like, I think esports is, I mean, I don't like watch any actual sports. Sports is huge. And I think I'm really fascinated by it. I feel like unlike traditional sports where there's like, a tiny fraction of humans on the earth that are physically capable of playing on the professional level. Most, esports, the pool of people that could be both like fans as well as participants, that ratio is so much different. Yeah. It's really fascinating to me because I think in the fullness of time, esports has the potential to be like way bigger than traditional sports. Yeah. Because of the fact that there's so many more people who are physically capable of playing at a super, super high level. And I think in terms of LBE bringing it back, I think that's a super smart strategy because it's something really fun to watching people play something like Beat Saber or Super Hot as a spectator. It's hilarious and amazing too if they're great. I
think what I think too is exciting to me about esports is that when I travel overseas, especially when I filmed with a number of different nonprofits where we'd go to South America, Bolivia, Lebanon, that kind of thing. And it feels like one of the big limiting factors for sports in general that we don't think about as Americans is just access to facilities. Most countries not every town doesn't have a beautiful soccer field or a basketball gymnasium or an ice skating rink or whatever. So esports, as the price comes down on headsets and it gets more and more accessible no matter where you are, no matter, again, if you're,
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Like, I mean, doing a soccer field is actually incredibly expensive, I bet. Doing a basketball court
the luxury of having just a beautiful square of green we don't think about what goes into that. But I saw the questions on the narrative side of things.
Why don't we jump into that?
And I'll be, since this is, Chatham House rules, I'll be just super honest and upfront with where things are at today. I would say that we are seeing a growing number of locations that are wanting to use and trying to figure out how to use narrative content. But it's still, obviously, the bulk of the minutes are still going to sort of the Beat Sabers, the Job Simulator, Arizona Sunshine, kind of those types of arcade titles, more the entertainment titles. It is interesting though, because we're starting to see, and we've been, I think maybe if you guys got the email about this, you probably saw that with Kaleidoscope, we're partnering with the Cannes Film Festival. So we're working really hard, and we've been working for 6 months now on figuring out how to offer narrative content in the LBE space and give operators a way to use it beyond just, hey, here's this narrative content, do what you think you should do with it. So we've been testing with arcades and trying to figure things out. Like I had mentioned, we have arcades that are starting to do immersive movie nights, Wednesday night, Friday night, let's show these 3 shorts, and even doing a little bit different business model where instead of for $20 for an hour, it's for these, pay $15 for these 3 short immersive experiences. And we've seen a couple titles like Nature Tracks actually, which is not an entertainment title. It's kind of a tranquil, meditative, put on a headset and you're in these beautiful, almost like art scenes of forest environment with deer and magical sprites and stuff. And so it's almost more of an art piece than anything. That's actually snuck up into our top 20 without us doing really any promotion. So as of now, I would say we have not had a lot of narrative content, and we've not pushed a lot of narrative content. And I think it's kind of a question mark in my head of how well can narrative content do. But as I'm starting to experience some of these fantastic new VR titles where I guess I can't talk about that one, but there's a few, I'm sure that you got many on the call know that some of the bigger studios are working on these kind of interactive immersive experiences that have 90 minutes of content that's broken up into 6 or 7 or 8 different character lines. And so I think as we start to see more really quality narrative content that's designed for VR first, that you can't experience in a 360 window or even on a daydream, that you have to interact and immerse. And I think there's going to be a demand for people to try those types of experiences. And the fact that there are locations in every major city and most minor cities in North America where you could go in and play some of those or try some of those, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think it's important to note that VR arcades, even though the term arcade kind of stuck, like I mentioned earlier, they really don't see themselves as just a traditional come in, coin slot, get a plush toy. That's not really, these guys they were like us, like they're pioneers. They saw an opportunity and they bought a headset early on and were blown away by it and wanted to show all their friends, and then decided it's not enough to show all our friends. We need to get a space, and we don't know how we don't know how to get started in VR other than just to get an area in the mall and put up some headsets and start seeing what happens. So I think it's not a defined category like as you think coin-op arcades. That's a very defined category. I think this is a category that's still very much defining itself. And so we're hoping, at Springboard, we're really trying to help shape that too. So. We've got a couple other questions that have come in, and I want to just let everyone know that we'll make sure to wrap back and get them if they don't naturally unfold. I'm tracking them. I just wanted to ask for a couple of those example arcades that you think are really good question. So, oh man, I should have come with a list. The Servios guys in Torrance have a pretty cool location that's doing pretty well.
That location is based in some place called Torrance, is that the name?
Yeah, it's Torrance in LA. It's like a neighborhood in LA. If you search or if you go to the Servios website, I think they're both, you guys know, they're both publisher and content creator, and they also have a location that's kind of. I
didn't know that. Oh, so they've got one location and it's
one location. I think they're probably going to open more, but they've developed their own. So they did Creed, Electronauts, Raw Data, a couple other ones, and they
did Zombies on the Holodeck. Wasn't that their first one?
Maybe so. They did Jumanji back a while back, or at least helped with the publishing.
No, they're huge. They're big. I just didn't know they had a location.
They do. It's kind of an arcade. Runs Springboard, and they use it also kind of for R&D. There's some locations in Canada, like VRcade. Mont VR is one. That's an interesting one. They've got I think they've got 30 headsets and they've got 3 or 4 company stores, 120 or 150 stations total, and they keep opening new ones.
Wait, they've got 150 stations total in one location, or 150 locations?
No, so they've got, I think their flagship has 30, I think they've
Wow.
got about 30 in each location, and they on the weekends sometimes are at almost 100% utilization for 30 stations. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, which is wild. So and it's especially in the winter in Canada, up north where they are, it's people go out and they want to do LBE stuff. So I'm trying to think of what else. Can't remember the name. But there's some guys in Ohio, surprisingly, that have a really successful. They have a bunch of headsets, and they've gotten their price down to where, again, this is one of those things with anything out of home. It's all about throughput and all about volume, and maxing out on the weekends. And so this is an interesting thing. So early on, operators were charging about $1 a minute, so $60 for an hour. And
That
at that,
sounds
and
really expensive.
yeah. So at that price point, they were only getting sort of novelty seekers. They were not getting any repeat customers at all, and they were not
Yeah.
able to compete with movie theaters. So the price points come down all the way down to about $20 or so, 20 to 30 for an hour, which makes it much more competitive. An hour in VR feels like a long time. You
Yeah.
feel like you're,
Yeah, totally.
um, and yeah. So let's see. There's a couple. So like I
What
said,
about in the major metropolitan areas like New York,
yeah.
Paris, LA? What
Yeah,
about VR
yeah.
World? What do you think of them? Are they doing
VR
a good
World,
job?
it seems like they're in a unique situation in that they've got sort of they've got rent for cheap because of their arrangement, and they're in New York City with foot traffic. So I don't. It feels like it seems like they're doing well, but I don't know if it's a model you could necessarily repeat
Yeah.
even elsewhere in New York City. Yeah, I mean, major cities are. It's interesting. Major cities are tricky because you guys know if you've been to New York City and walked around downtown, all these storefronts are shuttering because the price of rent is so high. So major cities, I'm trying to think if there's. I know we have them in Paris. There's a bunch in LA that you can check out. San Francisco, New York City. There's a couple, especially in some of the boroughs. Trying to think in other like London. I know there's a couple. I can't think of off the top of my head though. I'm like I said, I'm much more on the
Content side.
studio
Okay,
side
well
of
then
things.
we'll skip it. I was hoping that we'd get like a couple examples that you were like, if you're in this
Got to
city,
check
go
these
check out
out.
this
Yeah,
one. Maybe
yeah,
afterwards we could follow up with that because I like just for me I want that like because I travel a lot and I'm always like trying to find like
yeah.
for instance I'll give some of the ones that have been really impressed by the Phi Center or Phi Center in Montreal.
Hmm.
They do regular exhibitions and Miriam, who's a Kaleidoscope member, she curates it and manages that whole thing. And I was super blown away by that. I thought they did a really great job. Very professional. It's, everything from how they do ticketing to how they
Hmm.
manage, people getting in and out of VR.
Hmm.
Some of the best LBE stuff that I've experienced, especially for like in sort of the more artistic side, their curation is really top notch. Okay, so why don't we do a quick pass on these questions, and then I want to dive into things from much more of the creator's perspective in terms of how they can. Oh yeah, oh that's neat. This is something that you should maybe know about potential collaboration or competition opportunity. But I love them, so you should try
Good
to
to
find a way
know.
to work with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you don't know Miriam, you should definitely get to know her. So we had a question about just so we sort of covered that one from Natalie about shooting games. Yeah, it's mostly shooting games. But we've got a lot of members that are into producing interactive gaming stuff too. It's not all just narrative people.
Hmm.
The Kaleidoscope universe. So yeah, it seems like a very small fraction of LBE is doing narrative cinematic stuff. I know that like a lot of the conversations I've had with LBE owners that are thinking about doing narrative, it really is about creating those programs. Like come see
Yeah,
the stuff that played at Sundance locally or whatever. And I'm
yeah,
wondering, is that part of the software that you're building with Springboard in terms of
yeah.
that the last 6 months you're working on
Yep.
how to make narrative work? So making it
So
easy to do
yeah,
collections?
so the first sort of foray into that will be the Can XR narrative channel, which will be available to arcades, and we're working on operator initiatives to help, like I said, for them to figure out how to use it. But I can see that being a great, we're also, anybody has connections or wants to connect us to, but we've been starting to feel out and connect with Sundance and Tribeca and others. And so you know, it'd be really fun to be able to go into a location and say, yeah, I want to see what was what was the most popular content at Cannes this year. I want to experience those. I want to see those experiences. And there's still not that much narrative immersive content. So I think it's, yeah. So hopefully we can have some of those channels.
All right, let's. So we got one from Mark. Hey, Mark.
VR video, so 360 video.
Yeah. Talk about 360 video and if you've seen any of that succeed in the LBE space.
So we currently support it as in kind of a manual way. So operators have to do one extra step, but we will soon have native support for 360. Obviously, we know there's a lot of really good, amazing 360 narrative content. So I think, again, it's hard for us to remember because we've been in VR now for 2 or 3 years. We have the headsets and everything, but it's just helpful to remember that in average city, when we did a massive survey of like 110 locations. When people poll their customers, like 95% plus have never put on a headset before. Maybe they've tried like a Google Cardboard or something. So I think that, yeah, people who come into VR arcades, they're not coming in just to play games. They really want to experience this new technology. And so I think 360 content definitely has a place. At the Cannes Film Festival, there's going to be an arcade, basically a 15 or so station arcade. That'll be the Springboard arcade. Really nice stations and everything. All of those stations will have 360 content running on it. And as far as the how to do it, yeah, ideally if you can package it and wrap it, that makes it even easier for people to launch. But if you upload it to Springboard, then we can support it even if you don't. But having it in an .exe format makes it more accessible. So, I think there's plenty of ways to do that now easily. So.
And then an interesting question from Owen, just like to get your read. And then I think this would actually be a good transitional question into like where things are headed in your opinion. Do you think that VR arcades, because yeah, I think Owen's right. I've seen a lot that sort of have 2 different sections where one's like, okay, this is the gaming section. This is like the theater section.
Yeah.
And then a number that are just like dedicated to one or the other. Do you think they'll do a hard fork and sort of become 2 distinct things?
I'm really interested. That's a great point, Owen. I'm super interested to see what happens there. You know, obviously with movie theaters, we have sort of a standard unit of movie theater, whatever, which is you have a screen and you have seats and a projector and a sound system, and there's 350,000 of those around the world. So you can distribute the same video file to, 250,000 movie theaters, and that's why you can spend $300 million on Avatar. The question I have is, are movie theaters going to start changing out some of their screens for spaces with headsets or positron chairs or whatever? Because I've seen the positron chairs, Jeffrey and those guys have been doing a great job, and they're just finally getting traction. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's I think right now we're seeing VR arcades wanting to operate as both, and that does create some confusion. Are you an esports space? Are you a family entertainment center? Or is this a space where film buffs can come every Wednesday night and watch the latest? I don't know. I also think though that partly it's a question of there's not so much great content that, if you had just the narrative set up, that maybe you could keep customers coming back. So
interesting.
And there's not yet that much like marquee big IP type content. Here's an interesting thing to think about is right now, content is not driving anybody to out-of-home locations. So movies, obviously, if you're Disney and you have Star Wars coming out and you're advertising to everybody, globally, movie theaters don't have to do anything. People are going to come to the local movie theater. They're going to watch Star Wars. Right now, the arcades have to do all of their own marketing. No single piece of content is getting people to come in through the door, with the exception maybe of the Jurassic World at Dave & Buster's and maybe Beat Saber, just because of some of the YouTube, sensation. But I think if we see that shift, if we see content starting to drive traffic, that's a game changer, and that will change everything. But that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Beat Saber was the first one that I feel like has meaningfully changed the game in terms of like a piece of content that I know just from conversation that people have bought hardware specifically to play.
Yeah.
And I bet that has to have translated to some LBE as well, where it's a thing that somebody sees on social media and they're like, oh shit, that looks amazing.
Yep.
I finally have that reason that maybe I was curious about VR and now it's going to tip me over to go buy a headset or, go to a location. Does Springboard support spatial audio, particular FB360 or
good question.
360?
I think we do. I can find out if you want to ping me on Twitter or something. I can find out for sure from our dev team. But
and that's actually a good aside. How can people get in touch with you? I mean, obviously they can message you on Kaleidoscope, so you've got your profile there.
Yep.
Would you have a preferred method for people to?
Anything. Twitter. I think I'm W Stackable. Email is just will@springboardvr.com. Or Kaleidoscope, any of those. Yeah, please reach out. We'd love to talk. I know there's a lot of fantastic studios and content creators probably as part of this community and on the call. And I probably don't know enough of you. So yeah, I would love to talk more, even just to answer questions. Honestly, if we're just trying to, we want to be helpful. We're trying to help. I think what I tell a lot of content creators is, as of now, LBE still isn't the primary driver for income. It's a supplementary income stream for many content creators. That said, our top 20 content creators are, high 5-figure. Many of them are making enough to support their whole team just on LBE. But particularly in the narrative space, it feels like it is one of those like, let's try it and see what kind of income it starts driving. And we have a long tail of titles that are making money every month, even if it's not thousands and thousands of dollars. But again, I also say that it's such a small space still that I think that there's going to be titles that get in now and studios that get in now and build credibility and, get access to those locations, that as the overall space grows, the volume's going to grow, the pie's going to get bigger. So I still think it's worth it to get in now, even if it's not a major driver for revenue. I would encourage any narrative or immersive type studios that are working in this space. If you're putting together a business model or, pitch for investors, I would put LBE in there as like let's try it, but I wouldn't run the numbers and expect a major return today. I think I think it will grow, but that's just me being super honest that as of today, if you have the next Beat Saber, then you're going to make bank anywhere. But yeah.
Well, so let's talk about that. So a lot of artists that are, in development on a project today, they'll go through the fundraising process. So 6 to 12 months later, they'll be in production. So it's like a thing that's in the development phase now probably won't be released for another 12 to 24 months. So what do you think those artists should be focused on in terms of making content that will play well for where you imagine the industry being in a 12 to 24 month span?
That's a great question. If you get an answer for that you feel confident, tell me, because if you can predict the next 12 months, I will. I've seen some pretty good pitches from studios that are looking at really just getting their content into as many places as possible. And maybe that's the obvious answer is, you don't want to do the least common denominator. So you don't want to build your content for Google Cardboard so that you can get it everywhere. But I do think there is some kind of balance as far as quality goes and probably even as far as the audience goes. The first rule of any narrative medium is know thy audience, know who you're talking to. So I would just encourage people, if you feel like your title is going to be interesting for a general audience, particularly in the out-of-home space, it is a lot of families with kids. So it's kind of cool because it's not gamers really. That's not who's coming in. It's the population you want to reach, which is families with some kind of expendable, some kind of income that have kids that want to come in and jump in. So I think the general audience one, if that's the type of content you're working on, then definitely consider LBE. The only things I have a blog on Medium, and I posted a recent article a couple months ago that's sort of factors to consider when you're designing for LBE. The obvious ones are somebody's coming in, they're paying, for an hour of VR. They don't necessarily want to spend a long time in a menu screen or in a tutorial or a loading screen. So getting them quickly into an engaging experience, making it, if it's narrative, making it chapter based so that they can come in and play 20 minutes, and then next time they come in, they can play the next 20 minutes. So if you have a 90-minute experience and it's not chunked up, it's a little bit more difficult, not as accessible. So this is interesting. We have a lot of content creators who have built something for the in-home space that have made some relatively minor modifications and created sort of an arcade build with simpler menu systems, if it's narrative or story-based, chaptered it, just a few minor things like that that's ended up doing really well. And I think the majority of our top 50 titles, or at least top 20 titles, have been modified for LBE. So sometimes that can be without a lot of additional development work, especially if on the front end, as you're planning your content, is if you're going to fork your content and have an in-home version and an out-of-home version. We've actually also talked to guys like the Weaver guys, Gnomes and Goblins, that kind of thing, where you could do a preview version, which is just a short version that is really just to get exposure for your IP and your characters, and then have a longer version that's available in-home.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So maybe I'm going to ask some folks if they want to jump in and share updates about their work now.
Yep.
A little feature in the attendee list where you can raise your hand, and then I can pull you in as a panelist. And while we're soliciting updates from folks on the call, would you mind grabbing that Medium post and throwing it in the chat log?
Yeah. Yep.
So yes, everybody on the attendee list, does anyone have a thing they want to ask about in person, or an update they want to share? Now is the time for that. While you are thinking about that, I'll give an update on my end. This week we announced, the thing that Will was referring to, that we're partnering with Con on a development showcase where we're selecting about 20 projects that are in development and looking for funding or support of another kind. And we're putting together these, what I think will be really cool pitch sessions, basically, where we'll give you the opportunity to give a presentation about your work to a curated list of potential investors and distributors and industry people that are in a position to support your work. I'll throw a link into the chat log about that. And then another thing to be aware of is, as part of that partnership, we've got 200 festival passes to Con that we're going to be able to award to our members. So I'm going to be making that available on Monday or Tuesday of next week. So if you're thinking about going to Cannes, don't buy a pass yet. So they're like $400 or something like that. So I'd love to make sure that you guys can get in for free. So anybody, okay, we got another question from Gregory, but no hand raisers. So I guess nobody has anything they want to share. So what about kids at LBE? Is it worth developing content primarily created for kids, or are there still too many restrictions? That is a good question. I know Oculus still has that legal restriction for like 13 and up, I think, only. Yeah. I'm not sure if HTC does, but.
Yeah, I think most locations, it's usually 12 and up, partly determined by height, actually. If a kid's too short, it's hard for a lot of experiences for it to work for them. Funny, imagine the job simulator counter. If you guys have ever played the Quickie Mart chapter, we've seen kids that are at the counters above their eye level, so they can't even, they're doing this number. So I think it's, and then obviously, if it's sort of if it's not a family-friendly title, it's not going to do as well as LBE, because operators are going to be a little bit concerned about kids coming in and playing without their. But I think the parents have to sign a waiver if they're under 16 or something. So
that's surprising that like 12 is the cutoff, and yet they're focused on families, because it seems like that would be cutting out a lot of.
I don't think it's enforced Honestly, I think that's more for legal protection. That's been my understanding, at least. I think 12 is what both HTC, isn't Oculus 12 or is it 13?
12 or 13, something
I
like
think
that.
that's what the headset manufacturers include as part of their terms of service. So I don't know if that's actually being adhered to, but I see
Interesting.
when I've been in locations, I've seen little bitty kids with, they're having to hold the headset like this because their head's so small. So
Yeah, they're not made for kids in terms of just a human design perspective. Like they're yeah.
Nathan asked about distributors in the education space. Are there competitors besides Springboard? There really isn't a lot. There's no real marketplace yet that's for EDU. I mean, I think you could probably find other ones. I don't honestly have them off the top of my head, but yeah, the EDU space is so new. Microsoft just announced an initiative with Pearson. So the Microsoft Store will start being used in the education space. But if anybody's used Windows Mixed Reality headsets and tried the Cliff House, it's not really something that universities are going to use in its current form. So Microsoft will have to make some changes. But
Well, I guess my last question then before we let you go, unless there's anything else from folks on the line, is if you could give people, I mean, this is sort of my bottom line when I'm thinking about the LBE space and projects that we're interested in supporting, is like how much money can people make today and how much money do you think they'll make in the future? So I know there's a huge delta between like a big hit that's doing really well, and it's probably like the top 10 make up like 80% of the revenue,
yeah.
right? But can you? So it's like high five figures for that top 10. What's sort of what could like an artist that has something that's really good but isn't in that top 10? Like,
Right.
Are we talking like hundreds of dollars a month or 1,000, 2,000? Like what kind of?
I think if you looked historically, again, it's a little bit tricky because we've been adding 30 to 60 locations a month for going on almost a year now. So if I look at what they were making in summer of last year versus today, it's obviously already changed. So if it doubles again a couple times this year, even if we're at, I think we're expecting between EDU and entertainment, it'll double again here shortly. So, but if that happens, then you got to do the math as far as on the growth curve. But historically, the mid-tier, I'd say that $1,000 mark a month, some more, some less. And I'm trying to think what other things I could give that would be helpful.
Well, even that number is very helpful to give people like, because some artists that does make a difference. If you're like a single developer producing something and you can, potentially make a couple $1,000.
And one of the things that I also talk about with specifically for, on the narrative immersive content side of things is that there is, again, the number of headsets, it's like when people are comparing the opportunity to get into movie theaters and there being, 500,000 movie theaters or whatever, the total number of stations that are available for you to get on is it's in the thousands, right? So it's still not very high. Again, if that grows and keeps continuing to grow quickly, then that will change. But I do think that's still an interesting number that may be worth writing down, is that even right now we're doing 4 to 6 million minutes a month, which is about on average 200,000 or so unique users, meaning new users a month. And so there is, for VR content that may not get played or watched very, very much, there is still a large, getting into the LBE space gives you access to a large segment of the population of people who are experiencing VR for the first time. And I think that there is some real value to that. The people right now who have VR headsets for the most part are very early adopters that are mostly gamers that have high-end gaming PCs. So I think, and again, you want to be as many places as you can be. So yes, port your content to the Oculus Quest and get it on the go. But if you're going to do a tethered PC-driven version, then it's very minimal expense to throw in to do a version for LBE, or just to take the existing version you've got and put it on the platform. So yeah,
Last
Nature
question
Checks and
from,
others. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the last question from Natalie, because I know we're about at the hour mark, and I need to catch a plane. How many titles are you offering total?
We've got, I think, just over 300 right now, and with Cannes coming up, they're telling us we should expect between 100 and 200 narrative titles. So and again, I will say we're going to curate those carefully. So we don't want to just swamp operators with 150 new titles. So we'll probably bring on another 50 to 100 narrative titles shortly.
Out of Cannes?
Mm-hmm.
Or mostly out of Cannes?
Yeah.
Cool. That's great. Yeah. Well, definitely encourage everyone to go to Cannes this year.
Yes, come see us. We're supposedly we may get a house, so you may be able to come by and come to an event with us. And
yeah, you could be hanging out with Will and I in super dope house in Cannes in a matter of months. I know in the past, like Cannes has rubbed me a little bit of the wrong way. It felt like it was trying to extract a lot of value out of artists without providing it. I know they were charging a lot of money, and I know that. Ellie, the programmer of Con this year, this is the first year he's doing it, and I feel like he's approaching it really from the right perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely changed my mind and made me want to participate for the first time. So I think I know I'm definitely going to do everything I can to make it valuable and artist friendly. And a big part of that is making it affordable, like by not having them charge artists a lot of money to come and be a part of it. Anyway, so that's all I got from me. Thank you, Will, for being a part of this. Hope to see you as a attendee at some of these sessions in the future. And
I know,
I'm really excited about what you're doing with Springboard. Artists need more opportunities to distribute their work. So, I mean, just as a sidebar, we should have a talk to figure out how we can, like Kaleidoscope, help curate some programs.
Yes.
I know. That's a conversation we're having with like VR World and some other LBE people. But since you're,
I would love that. Yeah,
to do that, we should make that happen.
Yeah, I think as many people testing things and trying things, seeing what works. It's an experimental phase. So yeah, I agreed.
Cool, man. Take care.
Well, fly safe. Thanks everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Adios.